Hello, I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of Blue Stack Productions, the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine covering environmental matters in the island of Ireland. I'm very happy today to be here in Dublin with Duncan Stewart. Duncan, you're very welcome.
Hi Bob, it's great. Thank you for coming over. Looking forward to having a good chat with you today.
I've certainly seen you on Echo Eye, which we'll be talking a lot about, and it's a pleasure to see you in person finally. Duncan, now tell you started out as an architect, yes?
Yeah.
When and where was that?
Well, my whole career is an architect, and in a way my architecture was very influenced by the oil crisis back in the early 70s. And I changed my architecture completely during that crisis of energy, when I realised that all of our buildings were designed totally wrong. And I focused my buildings, all my designs, into energy efficient buildings and into solar energy and into environmental materials, timber and those sort of things. So all my architecture would have gone in that direction after the oil crisis.
When was that started? When did you start as an architect?
Well, I qualified in 1970.
70?
But
Okay.
by 73 I was lecturing in the School of Architecture in DIT. And once I got into that, I realised that householders weren't really engaged in this and weren't empowered in this area and weren't informed about this important aspect of their buildings, the longer term issues of energy.
So this is how you got into the TV production business.
Yeah, I felt television was probably the best way to get information out to ordinary people. That's why.
And currently you're head of Earth Horizon Productions. What's your position?
Well, I was head. My son Marcus has taken over from
Okay.
as of from 3 months ago.
Okay.
He's now, if you like, this is his office. I'm sitting in his throne here. I'm a bit like the pleb here, or the gopher here in a way.
Your company is a Irish TV and documentary production company, and Echo Eye is the main focus for us today, which we'll talk about shortly. But you also did a TV series on About the House, and did you also do another TV series, Changing Face of Dublin?
Changing Face of Dublin, yes. That was a 4-part series, just looking at Dublin in terms of various ways we were changing the city, in terms of looking at the way we sprawled out from the city, the condition of our heritage part of the city, and the vulnerability of our heritage part of the city. Then of course the problems of transport, and lots of issues like that. But also kind of the attitudes of people, in Dublin. The changing attitudes, at the time. We're becoming very much a consumer society at the time. So those sort of issues. But I did other series like Our House for 7 years. I did a series called State We're In for 2 years, environment series. That's about 18 years ago. Wood from the Trees, a series on woodlands and forestry and all the uses we make of wood and the ecosystems of our forests and trees, which was a 7-part series I did across Europe, filmed it in 8 or 9 countries in Europe, in different types of woodland habitats and etc. and cultures, uses of timber.
And these were all shown on broadcast on RTE?
All on, but maybe between 410 and 440 programs.
Now, Echo Eye is the program I want to focus on with you today, because that's the pure environmental program that's been run for now 13 seasons?
13 series done, yeah.
And
114 series.
100 episodes?
Yeah,
Something
130
like that.
maybe, 130 episodes, yeah.
Okay.
Of that series, yeah.
And that's funded by the Irish EPA in part?
Yeah, in other words, very few of my programs are commissioned by RTE. Most of my programs, practically all of them, are acquisitions by RTE. In other words, I have sponsors, state sponsors, that fund the series because the broadcaster wasn't willing to sponsor them or to fund them. So I went to EPA with that series, and they came behind it with support funding. Also, they've got a wealth of expertise within their scientists, so I've been able to avail of their huge range of different experts in the different areas of environmental science. So at the same time, I've maintained the integrity of the program, and the impartiality and the independence and all of those issues in terms of editorial control, completely separate from the sponsors. So they're not interfering with the editorial content of the programs.
And I know from speaking with people at EPA, they're very keen on the series. I think they're very proud of that series.
Well, they've been extremely helpful and proactively helpful in every way. So we have a great relationship, and it's really gone very well for years. Without them, I couldn't do the series. The other funding comes in from other organisations like SEAI, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, who fund certain programs, and Forest Service, various other government departments.
Okay, now the interesting thing for me in particular is that it's 13 seasons now, so this is 2002 or so that you started Echo Eye.
In that order, yeah.
And a lot's happened in that time, and I think you you have a particular perspective on the kind of changes within the environmental movement in Ireland that very few other people have. Frank MacDonald has that too in some way for writing for the Irish Times, but you have it from a very different perspective. And I thought what we could do is kind of focus on that experience that you've gained and see if you can talk to us as we go through this on the changes that you've noticed, both in the content of the work that you deal with and also in terms of the process and how you treat the content that you find.
I could even go back before Echo Eye, because if I go back to the State We're In series, which was, I did 2 series of that. Well, at that time we were shooting on film, in other words, Super 16. Everything was incredibly well scripted. The amount of time that went into the production was incredibly detailed. The pre-production and the script writing and everything was very well worked out in terms of content for that series, which was very, very different to my lifestyle series on home improvement, which was very much out ad-libbing.
Yes.
I'm an architect, so it was quite easy for me. But that was basically, you go out and shoot and interview people there and then, and it was very much ad hoc as we went along. So totally different kind of genre, if you like, between the two. But there's been huge changes, if you like, since then, because at that time you could get the budget for high production value. And because it was expected that it would be high value, we set out to be better than the broadcaster in terms of production value. So that was we knew that was critically important, because if we were going to get environment programs onto our national broadcaster, we need to really have a very high quality right through.
Now you're talking about Echo Eye at this point.
Yeah, this is Echo Eye now.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And on top of that too, we had to make sure that everything was based on evidence, factual evidence, scientific, peer review where possible, so that there was no kind of fluffing around with issues.
At the time, this is 2002, where did you get the expertise?
Well, first of all, our EPA had a great resource of experts, which was good. But then there were environmental NGOs, and there were scientists that were working in the field, small number, very few at the time. And in fact, there was a huge starvation of knowledge then. You know? There wasn't, like today, a kind of a huge amount of information, and information changing all the time and developing and refining on environmental topics. At that time, climate change wasn't a big topic. Irish people were not making the connection between global warming and climate change and these issues properly. And it was kind of a sensitive issue to bring in, because you didn't want to be kind of sounding negative either. So, and the broadcaster was very much saying, "Oh, no doom and gloom here. You know, we need to attract an audience. We need to make sure we build an audience here. We don't want to turn off an audience." So they would have come from that concern.
And what kind of issues were more prominent in the beginning of the series Echo Eye?
Well,
climate change comes later, and we'll come back to that. But what were the kind of issues were prominent?
Issues like waste and recycling was a big issue. Water quality, contamination to water. You know, things like obviously farming impacts. Septic tanks, sewage, all of these sort of issues affecting water quality. So we would have interviewed anglers and people like that would have been close to the water. Inland Fisheries Ireland now, who were in their own groups, smaller groups, regional areas before that, they would have been very helpful in their knowledge, because they were seeing first-hand knowledge of the quality of water and the impacts of pollution getting into our rivers, etc.
Okay. And did you, as the course of time went on, did you find you were getting people approaching you with, like from the environmental groups or from the general public even, proposing ideas or projects or issues?
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback from the public. You know, like after a program would go out, we get kind of emails back, or well, in those days it was mostly letters from people. And then there was a lot of time spent answering those letters too. But you know, when you think of it, because you might get 100 letters straight after a program, and a lot of ideas and suggestions. So a lot of ideas would have come from the public. You know, in that way, and from NGOs. I mean, I've had great relationship with all those different environmental NGOs around the country, who basically I would go to them for advice or where they're looking at issues and what are their concerns,
The nature of the topics changed over time, correct? And what was the direction that they went into?
Well, I think they've gone more serious. I suppose when I look back, environment wasn't really treated as a mainstream issue or a serious topic by Irish public, We're a bit behind the rest of Europe. We're probably 20 years behind, in fact, in attitudes and in culture, in terms of our awareness of issues. When I'm filming in Europe and just meeting ordinary people, even, taxi drivers or, anybody, they're more informed generally than the typical Irish public about these serious topics like biodiversity loss and climate change and resource depletion, these sort of areas. But I found that there has been a change, there's been a growing awareness in recent years about these issues. People now will, when I give a talk at a conference, they'll often come up to me, farmers, and say, by the way, what you're talking about with climate change, we see it happening on our farm. We see situations that are very different what they were before, and unpredictable, events and persistent bad weather and flooding and things like that. That awareness wasn't there, say, 10, 15 years ago. So that at least is something important, that people are realizing that there are big impacts happening. And realizing that these issues are of big concern.
Yeah, and to be honest, part of that interest is because of your show. I mean, in fact, you're promoting those issues, and that's helping develop that awareness, it seems to me.
Well, I
can say that for you. I can say that for you.
I would love to think. I feel that we're just a very small little. We're a small little pebble in a pool, but I don't think our influence is that much. I think the influence probably for environment would be more coming from the NGOs around the country that are out there actively bringing these issues to the public, probably more so. I don't think the media has been acting very well in this area generally. I'm very disappointed with the media generally, not just in Ireland, by the way, but global media. I mean, the only newspaper that I really trust on this issue is The Guardian.
I know, same here. It's
the only one I do. There could be American ones that you could trust, but I don't have them.
No.
But certainly in Ireland, yes, the Irish Times comes close, but television, radio, you can't trust.
And with the with Frank McDonald retiring from the Irish Times, you worry about what that's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank was really good. There's another guy, John Gibbons, that was
John.
Really good. John Gibbons was really on the ball.
Yeah, he is.
He took those issues very, very seriously.
He's a good, hard-hitting journalist. Hard-hitting journalist.
Both of those are very important people.
Now, in terms of the audience, Duncan, have you noticed the audience changing over time?
Yeah, obviously we're losing young people because they're
losing
them onto social media.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a big move from young people under 40s, for example, have shifted away from television to social media and internet. That's a big change that's happened. So typically you will get rural people in Ireland because they're at home with their family probably, and television is still centre stage, But in an urban area, I think I'm losing all the time to the people that matter most, which are the young generation. So that's a big issue for me, because television, to me, should be the platform for the young generation to understand the challenges that they face and into the future, and really to make them understand that their future needs to be protected.
What do you do about that? Have you thought of any ways of?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at social media side of things now.
As I think I said when we were talking earlier, we're both storytellers, and I think we all are that. And do you find that have you been telling the stories that you tell now differently than you did when you first started filming Echo Eye?
Well, if you think there are different types of programs, that we would do in Echo Eye. There's the serious documentaries. If we do a program on climate change, it's very serious. And RTE would get kind of serious, concerned about it, because I really get into the topic, and the issues are so frightening with climate change that it can't be kind of done, it has to be done in that style of serious factual information and looking into the future. If I'm doing a program, say, on local communities and visiting local communities around the country and seeing what they're trying to do, and they're engaging in small areas of, say, energy efficiency or in renewable energy for their own community, basically, keeping money circulating in their local economy from producing their own energy locally from renewable sources, or in food the same way, you know, well then the style of that program is like chat, and it's very relaxed, and it's very very different. But I'm getting a great reaction from audiences, you know, like we get a big audience. We get over 400,000 viewers on average
per each episode.
Yeah, and if you take repeats in for the year, you know, it's 3 repeats about 3 times. There's over 600,000 viewers. Wow. So that's quite a big chunk of a large audience.
It certainly
you know?
is.
And people come up to me in the streets and say to me, Duncan, we need more of these. We really like what you're doing. That's the basic comment I get from nearly everybody that I meet in the street. Very seldom will I get anyone coming up and criticising me for being so serious about climate change or anything like that. They're looking for it. There is an audience out there. I'm not sure that everybody, but certainly there is an audience that wants to be informed more. They don't want dumbing down, and they don't want superficiality.
One of the things that was interesting when I was preparing for the interview, I looked back at some of your early episodes, and in episode 5, you did a program on climate change, the first episode, series 5, and you just did one, 13, the current episode on climate. And there's such a big difference between the two, which I found quite interesting. The first one was a series really of talking heads, and it was using kind of file photos and images in that. And the latest one is really out there in the world with your own filming, looking at the kind of impacts from it, and it's more focused on you as a narrator, which I find quite interesting. That seems to be a real change over the years, where you're really becoming more central. And I think storytelling requires a narrative. I don't mean that as egotistical. I mean it's really it gives a focus that the talking heads don't do.
I suppose if I look back on it, I always saw myself as just the person to get the message out.
Right.
You know, and I was only the vehicle to interview experts, people that have knowledge, their information, or you know, real people on the ground doing work like in NGOs and things like that. So I have always treated myself as just there to facilitate them to get their message out there and make sure that it's the right message and people can rely on it as truthful information and factual information. I suppose in latter years I'm realising that I have to play a central role, because I've learned a lot myself over the years, and I have strong opinions now, which I have to be careful with. You can't be preachy, you know, and I certainly don't ever want to be preachy, but certainly I need to be stronger in the way I deliver things and out there where the real action is. And if I'm interviewing a scientist, I want to get behind his, not just the science where he's kind of safely within the science. Ask him about his own personal life on this. How does it emotionally, how does he feel about these issues? What about his family, you know? And this all comes out, and I think that's very important. And the convincing is got to be done in such a way that people see solutions. You know, like all of our programs would set up the issues. You know, what are the impacts from these issues? You know, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions or whether it's water pollution issues or whatever the issue is. So we set up the problem, how it affects us, how it will affect us in the future, the consequences of this, etc. And then the cause of these things. But then we quickly move into solutions. So over 50% of the content would be about solutions where possible. Because people need hope, you know. When it comes to kind of dealing with an issue that's like climate change, that's really a future issue, even though it's coming down on us much faster than we thought, but also a global issue rather than immediately affecting us. In other words, my emissions don't immediately affect me. That's hard to get through to ordinary people because they've got their own problems. You know, the average person watching our programs has all their own personal problems, their family, their livelihoods, their salary, all the difficulties they face every day. You know, and their focus is going to be on those immediate issues. So for me, those issues that are longer term, it's hard to get across the connection. How do you get people to realise that they must make big changes and demand of their government big changes? Because really, if the electorate don't influence policymakers, then there's no hope for us.
Now, are there any other like issues or topics in the environmental field that you find more difficult to talk about?
Biodiversity would be too.
That's exactly
because of what's happening. It's very, very sad what's happening in biodiversity. So many species are going extinct that we know, that we'll never see again, you know. And the whole issues there with ecosystem services, and we so depend on for all of, couldn't survive without the functioning of our ecosystems and their services. So these issues can be hard to get across to people, you know. Yes, you can focus on polar bears, and you can put these sort of things, iconic animals that people can identify with. But when it comes down to little snails and all these other things, people lose it.
And have you done any on Harvest 2020?
Harvest 2020? Well, yes, but then of course we've done programs, and there's a lot of good things being done with Teagasc in looking at efficiency in farming and reducing the amount of carbon emissions and water pollution, and at the same time making sure that biodiversity is protected. But at the same time, there's a problem in this country with agriculture, in that we're obsessed with exports of meat and dairy to places like China and the US and places like that, when we still import 4.5 billion worth of food ourselves. And secondly, we're so, if you like, involved with meat. I mean, meat, if everybody ate meat like we do, then we'd already have reached maybe 5 or 6 degrees Celsius on the planet by now. It's not possible for us to eat more meat. We have to look at meat as we have to look at coal. So there are big issues there that are in a way being given a green gloss by our government, because the big meat exporters and the big kind of dairy producers selling formula milk to China and places like that, they're making money out of those exports. But the average farmer isn't really getting very much. The average farmer is struggling. Irish farmers are small. And those farmers with, say, suckler cattle, or, you know, finishing cattle, or small dairy farmers, they're struggling. They're not getting much. They're surviving. They're like pawns to these big producers. So I see big problems with agriculture.
Here's the most important question I want to ask you today. What's in the future for Duncan Stewart?
Well,
there was rumors once in a while that you were going to run for office, maybe for the Green Party.
Last couple of years ago, I came very close to European elections, because simply because my only reason was that the issues that I'm concerned about were not being addressed during that election in Ireland, for European elections. And I felt, at least if I ran, I'd bring these into the public domain. I'd make it an issue. But having kind of thought about it, and in a way got very close to making a decision, came right up to the edge of actually signing off to get to Ross, I felt it was the wrong thing for me. Because I felt straight away it would change people's attitude towards me. I wanted to represent ordinary people and the average person, and what's the important issues in the longer term, the common good issues, basically. And I felt I would be polarised, and that it would become, I wouldn't be able to operate in that space.
So what else is in your plans?
Well, I'm looking more internationally at doing documentaries. And whether it's online or through television, I'm not sure. That's one area. But I'm also looking at local communities, where I'm putting a lot of energy into trying to foster in local communities in Ireland. Because I think they're critically important, that we need to build resilience at a local level. You know, when the impacts of climate change start to bite, we need communities in Ireland and globally able to cope.
Now, do you see that as a way you would approach that, like on the grounds social activism, or you would somehow document that or film it?
When I was young, I was an activist. I set up a group called RAGE when I was in college. I was vice president of the USI at the time. But I set up this group called Radical Action for Good Environment. Well, it was 3 or 4 of us did together. And we were protesting about Georgian Dublin being destroyed. The Grand Canal was going to be turned into a motorway. I went through that in my young days. You know? But so that was my activist days. I will do a bit of activism if I have to. But the trouble is, if you become an activist and you're broadcasting, you're compromising your integrity as a broadcaster. So I'm reluctant to get into that area for that reason.
And we need broadcasters like yourself. And it's very nice. You haven't lost your rage, and it's good to see that still there for you. Thanks for talking with us today.
Not at all. Thank you, Bob.